Hello, this is session 18 of the Black Theology, Black Church, Theology 333. I'm Dr. Greg Jones, and we're going to be doing a session today on the development of the black Muslims in America. We're going to talk about the rise of the Nation of Islam and the leadership that has been involved or was involved in the development of that alternative religious experience and movement in American culture, American society. This is one of the most powerful and influential groups of alternative religious community in America, in the world today, and in the world today. We cannot talk about the African American religious experience unless we visit the origins of this profound and prophetic and powerful organization of people. We're talking about black Muslims in America. We're going to start with a study of a couple of the leadership in it, and we're going to end up this session and in the beginning of next session dealing with the beginnings of the Civil Rights Movement. We're going to look at Malcolm X as well. But we're going to start with Wallace Fard, who was a individual who influenced greatly the teachings of Islam in the Nation of Islam. Fard was born in 1877, claims to be born in Arabia, but people have discounted Arabia and said New Zealand. Some say that he was born in Oregon. There's just claims he has a mysterious kind of flavor to his development in the picture of the growth of Islam in America. I would say Arabia probably is the best chance guess of that. Some people say within the Middle East, we're talking about Afghanistan, possibly. He's the claim is that he's a prophet descended from Muhammad, and he was influenced by the teachings of Noble Drew Ali and the Moorish Science Temple. He organized in the city of Detroit, Michigan, and he began his organization, he called his organization the Lost Found Nation of Islam, July 4th, 1930. He told followers his presence was expected, and he was there to guide black people to the right path of Islam. Said African people, Fard said African people were the original people of this earth. Whites are a genetic mutation, and that Orthodox Islam will eventually recognize that the Nation of Islam is the truest expression of the will of Allah. He trained and influenced Elijah Poole and helped Elijah Poole change his name to Elijah Muhammad. Elijah called Fard Mahdi. Fard started the Fruit of Islam, which is a kind of paramilitary group, and helped develop the name changing protocols within the Nation of Islam. Fard started the University of Islam because he just felt that the religious communities and the educational communities of America was not adequate nor was proper to teach the original peoples. So he started a university. He started temples in Detroit and Chicago, and he disappeared in 1934 mysteriously. He was succeeded by Elijah Muhammad as leader of the Nation of Islam, and Savior's Day, even today, is celebrated, is dedicated to Fard and his teachings. He brought a lot of religious teachings and protocols and principles into the Nation of Islam. He also provided a wealth of information about the scientific fact that African peoples are the first and original peoples and are part of the earth. And you can, even today, if you connect to the Nation of Islam, there is a library full of information and documentation that Fard has influenced in the development of the Nation of Islam. Elijah Muhammad, his successor, was born in 1897. He died in 1975. He was born in Sandersville, Georgia in October, migrated to Detroit in 1923. He encountered Wallace D. Fard and began to work with Fard on building the Lost Found Nation of Islam in Detroit. In 1930, Elijah changed his name from Elijah Poole to Elijah Muhammad. We have mentioned that. and he relocated to Chicago after Fard disappears in 1934. Elijah was a different leader. He began to move progressively to the development of the Nation of Islam. He relocated, as I said, to Chicago. He established Temple Number 2, and he emerged as a national leader of the Black Muslim movement in America. He elevated Fard to divinity. He said he was a descendant incarnate of Allah, and he began to encourage membership to refuse to enroll their children into American schools and in the public school system. Instead, he encouraged them to participate in the University of Islam instead. He encouraged members not to bear arms for the United States of America in World War II, and he recruited membership from marginal masses of African Americans connected to the Marcus Garvey movement. There were a great group of masses of African Americans who were of, let's say, lower class or marginal individuals, and Elijah developed a wonderful protocol and procedure in terms of projects to reorganize people and redirect their energies toward positive development in the Nation of Islam. The Nation of Islam became the experts, if you will, at being able to convert people into Islam and have them basically discipline themselves to be productive members of American culture, American society, specifically directed toward the African American community. Now, we have to remember that this is a nationalist organization. This is an organization that essentially is saying that what we need to do is organize ourselves as black people and deal with the issues that impact us as a community. And Elijah Muhammad and the Nation of Islam, or black Muslims in America, become professionals at being able to do this. One of the tenets that they had is to own your own, to own your own. And so they kind of combine Marcus Garvey's thought in terms of nationalism and the attitude that Booker T. Washington had in terms of being self-sufficient. Marcus Garvey said you need to be separate and you need to evolve yourself in terms of connecting to your past and understanding yourself culturally. And we see also Booker T. Washington saying, basically, you need to be able to own your own businesses, own your own entrepreneurship. And the black Muslims, or the Nation of Islam in America, become expert at being able to help people understand this concept and participate. I will never forget my understanding of self-reliance changes when I was growing up. One of the things that I remember seeing is the your stores, which were grocery stores, restaurants, tailor shops, shoemaking concerns, businesses, real estate, that were all owned by black Muslims, and it was a opportunity not only to see self-reliance in terms of African American people, but also as a sense of pride for me personally and my family to see so many black people being organized in such a diligent and economically progressive fashion to deal with the issue of self-reliance, even though people didn't necessarily buy into the principles of Islam. They saw the Islamic community, the black Islamic community in the cities as a progressive community, as a positive and potentially powerful community. The people who were on the margins always respected the attitude that black Muslims and the Nation of Islam brought into the community. He also encouraged members to create farms in Michigan and in Georgia during the 1950s and the 1960s. He recruited Malcolm Little, who eventually becomes Malcolm X and becomes one of the most prolific and powerful prophetic voices in the civil rights movement and before the civil rights movement in the Nation of Islam. In 1952. Also, he gains national recognition, Elijah Muhammad does, when Cassius Clay, who was a fighter, heavyweight fighter, converted to Islam and changed his name to Muhammad Ali. He followed the teachings of Fard, Elijah Muhammad did, regarding the origins of the European race. He pushed the issue of separatism claimed the only way black folks would survive was to separate themselves, and wanted 5 states or so in the South to create a separate nation, to build a black nation, the lost found nation of Islam. He started writing. He wrote a work called The Message to the Black Man, and a newspaper that was called, or is called, Muhammad Speaks. These are still one of the major tenets in terms of the Nation of Islam. And after internal conflicts, Elijah Muhammad died in 1975, and the nation divided into 2 groups, one led by Wallace Dean Muhammad, the other by Louis Farrakhan. We need to understand how powerful this group was and how important this group was to the launching of the civil rights movement. And oftentimes you don't hear about the Nation of Islam and its history when you talk about the civil rights movement. But we have to recognize that this alternative religious group that was a part of the masses of African American people who claimed leadership in dealing with survival, liberation, and resistance against white racism in America was very important, and was an important piece of the evolution of African American people toward the civil rights movement, of which we will be talking about in depth. One of the main features of their offerings was the prophetic voice of Malcolm X. And what we will do on next time is we will look at the origins and theology of Malcolm X and his profound impact on the religious community of African Americans. We want to take a specific and very in-depth look at how Malcolm begins to look to mold and shape his perspective of theology as it relates to Africans in America. Malcolm, when we begin to talk about Malcolm X, we'll see that his childhood and his early history uniquely places him in a special position to understand the aspiration of the masses of African American people. And it's important for us to understand that if we are to get a clear and in-depth understanding of the development of the civil rights movement. We will see you next time. Thank you.